All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Late Night with Jake Smith. Hey, it's good to have everybody. As you all know, you can see the post. This is an extension of our Men of Hope ministry at Hope Community Church. We're super excited to have a bunch of you on board. Hello to you all. Feel free to say hello as you join in the chat section. We'd love to see some community sparking up in there. So the goal of Late Night with Jake Smith, we wanted to provide a platform just to get men connecting later at night. I'm not as funny as Jimmy Fallon, and I know that I have a bunch of competition with the Conans and Jimmys and Cordons of the world. But really, we're trying to just have a good time as the Men of Hope. So we got some fun things planned. We got a cool guest speaker joining us later. But don't worry, we're going to make sure that we can have some fun while we're doing it. So welcome here into my guest bedroom. I am calling in here from Eagan, Minnesota. And the apartment that we're in, we've converted our guest bedroom into an office. And so I'd love to say that this is our huge studio, but we all know we don't have that in the budget right now for Hope. Just kidding. Anyways, super low tech because getting into community doesn't need to have any more barriers. So we just wanted to have a space that we can all connect and also hear from God's word and hear from the Men of Hope as well. So first thing that we're going to do, we're going to jump right into our first activity. The first thing that we're going to do is, let me just take a sip out of my Yeti here. We're going to learn a little bit about me, right? Because my name's in the title. There's really no purpose for me being in the title other than I know some of you. Try and get more people to hop on. So our first activity is, what's in the cup, Jake? This is something we're going to do every single week. And did I mention we're going to do this every single week? And starting out with what's in the cup, Jake, every week we're going to learn about me in some way based off of what I'm drinking. And now don't worry, it was a brilliant idea of my wife, who I love so dearly. Mackenzie's just through this wall. So if you hear any knocking, it's because I'm talking too loud. But Mackenzie had this great idea to start 30 days of healthy living today. That includes no alcohol. Now, I'm not going to be sitting here with a bunch of bottles of booze or whatever. But what that means is I won't be sharing my favorite IPAs and maybe even my favorite types of whiskey. So just to know me a little bit, I do enjoy those beverages. But my favorite beverages are hot ones. And coffee, I'm a sucker for coffee. But tonight's actually a fun little mix-up because what's in the cup, Jake, tonight is an Earl Grey tea. In fact, it's an Earl Grey tea called Floral Grey. Now you're thinking like, why do I know so much about this weird tea name? It's actually because this is a tea that I made. So a little look into me. I was an entrepreneurship grad at the University of St. Thomas. Now, when I was in school and taking a degree in entrepreneurship, I started a tea company. And this was these are the remaining leaves that I have from that tea company I started in college. It was a brilliant name. It was called Smithy Tea Company. We really couldn't come up with anything greater. But that's just a little look because my full-time job now is actually helping other people that start their own businesses. So I work for a company called Generator. And my main focus is at the University of St. Thomas and helping people that are at the University of St. Thomas or connected alumni start, launch, and grow their businesses. So that's what I'm doing at 9 a.m. during the week. I'm starting my day off with Generator and helping connect companies to mentors, resources, investment, you name it. But that's just a little look into me. I love entrepreneurship. I love creativity and business implementation. And I love the simplicity of it, of trying to create value for other people. I've always had that bone in my body. So I've always been trying to find how I could help people. And I learned that products and services were a great way to do that when I started my first lawn mowing business in, seventh grade. Yeah, seventh grade. It was called I Got Your Back and Front Lawn Mowing Service. So clearly I have some humorous bones that matured at an early age. But anyways, cheers to my Earl Grey. If you have a beverage, which we encourage you to join in with the beverage, it's kind of like we're all sitting out at a bar anyways. But cheers to you guys for joining this thus far. And a little peek into Jake Smith and more to come each week on a different beverage. All right, so I'll place my Yeti here for brand marketing and see if we can get some marketing income that way. You're also noticing that I'm wearing a Mets jersey. That's because I'm a big baseball fan. Those who don't know me, I was a baseball player for much of my life, and I actually got to pursue and play in town here, a professional career for a little bit with the St. Paul Saints. And it was a huge blast. So you'll see me in baseball gear, a lot of baseball hats. Got my weapon of defense always on me because I'm a huge baseball fan. I love baseball analogies and in community as well. So if I drop any of those, I'm sorry if I'm bringing it up out of context. I love talking about baseball. So there's a little peek at me and who Jake Smith is. I'll be your host throughout all this. And again, this is Ministry of the Men of Hope as we're just trying to connect and give an avenue for men to get together, have a reason to be encouraged, especially during these trying times. We're super excited to jump in a little bit later. But don't worry, we still have a couple more games that we're going to play before we get there. So let's go on to our next one. Now we're going to do a game called Down the Aisle. And this is actually going to engage all of you guys in the chat section. So Down the Aisle is actually really aimed at those who are married. But don't worry, if you're not married, consider this your fair warning. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about things that husbands and wives can seem to scratch their heads at each other, and they learn that early on in marriage. I bring this up in experience. My wife, Mackenzie, and I have been married a little over a year. So we've definitely had our fair share of things that we do differently, and we're not so sure why we do them differently. So each week in Down the Aisle, I'm going to bring about one thing that sometimes causes distress between husbands and wives. But the whole point that we can laugh about this is it really doesn't matter any bit at all. And I don't know why I think it does matter. So this week, we are going to chat about the shower curtain. Now, I know some of you might know exactly what I'm talking about. Some of you might not. Here's how this went down. So early in our marriage, obviously, we're rotating, taking showers. My wife showers every day. I shower like every other day. And one of the things that we notice is when I get out of the shower, I'll leave the curtain closed so that you can see the entire bathtub. And some of you don't have curtains, but just play along here. But my wife, every time that she would leave the bathroom, she would make sure that it's closed. And it was a point of contention early on. So I'd love to hear in the comments section, go ahead and chat if you have a certain side of the aisle that you fall on here. Are you a closed curtain person or are you a open curtain person? Now, again, you seem, wow, this is kind of trivial. Why would anyone care about this? Well, the whole defense that I've understood is how can you best let the shower space dry out? In my defense, having it open was going to let air flow and let it dry out. In my wife's defense, it was going to close the curtain so that the curtain would dry. Now, I don't know if there's a best way to get both, but safe to say in our house, we close the curtain. Now, that's all, of course, G-rated because this is well after anyone's in the shower. It's just getting the shower dried out. But I don't know if that's just me. It could be. I could be wickedly blinded, but I want to be humble in that. I could be totally wrong. It makes a little bit of sense to have some airflow going through there. But who really cares? I don't really care all that much. At the end of the day, we might need to buy a new shower curtain every couple months. So that's putting us down. Let's see if our computer scientists can keep up with that math. About $3 a month, maybe. And I'm willing to pay that to have peace. All right. So last little thing that we're going to do before jumping on in to our special guest. We have a special guest here from our elder team. And his name is Stan Oster. I'm sure many of you know him. He helps out in our counseling ministries. He also helps out in our marriage ministry. And you've probably seen him somewhere or another on a Sunday morning. But before we jump into Stan and hear some great encouragement, we're going to do our last little bit. And this is Pastor Trivia. Now, what's super cool about Pastor Trivia is there is a prize involved. There is a prize involved for whoever comments with the right answer. What's the prize? Well, here, I haven't inherited a gift from a friend, and it's sat on my shelf for a long time, and I haven't opened the contents yet. But this is a faith box. A friend of mine started this as a subscription company. I'm not selling it, and I'm not giving him a shout out. Anyways, faith box is the prize. Whoever answers the question right will be put into a hat along with all of those who answered the question right. And a lucky winner will get a faith box. We'll deliver it without any germs. We'll make sure we spray it down, take care of everyone, but we'll send it to our lucky winner sometime before next week's Late Night with Jake Smith. So this is the grand prize. It's got a little bit of weight to it. Not entirely sure what's all in it, but it's meant to encourage and uplift people in their devotional times. So for Pastor Trivia this week, we're featuring Kor Shimoleski. Kor, as I'm sure you know, pastors at our downtown location. And here is the trivia question for Kor Shimoleski. It's a simple true-false. So everyone in the comment section, answer true or answer false. There is no other. True or false? Pastor Kor's favorite dessert pastry is an apple fritter. Go ahead. Let your answers be known. We will have a copy for all of the comments there if you answer correctly, and I will reveal that at the end of tonight's show. If you are correct, you'll be in a drawing for a faith box. So we'll create a little excitement. It looks like every single person is dead wrong. I'm just kidding. I won't give it away yet. But go ahead. What do you think? Pastor Core's favorite donut, pastry, dessert, apple fritter. True or false? All right. I'll take a sip from my Yeti here. And now I want to intro one of the main purposes of tonight. So we really wanted to engage with the men around Hope, especially during these times. We know about COVID-19 and the coronavirus, and every day it seems that there's another layer to the snowball about how we should be taking care of ourselves and taking care of our country. And for a lot of us, this has looked like quarantine. It's looked like staying in your home. It's looked like only connecting with people on camera just like this. And I'm sure that we're so sick of that. And it's hard to take, social distancing seriously. So I know that that's a big difficulty that we're all facing. And I don't want to put myself at a disadvantage. But as an extrovert, I'm really craving to see other people. And I'm really wanting to be creative on connecting. But I don't think that that's just unique to extroverts. And I don't think it's just unique to your character. I think as the body of Christ, it's really important for us to be in community, be in accountability, be in a space to connect and chat, and especially as men to be iron sharpening iron. And this season is definitely one that we can be aggressive to stay on top of, because it'll be really easy to make sure that we're comfy, right? It'll be really easy to feel isolated if we want to, and feel lonely if we want to. And those are okay things to do. We would love to encourage everyone to be battling sin in this time. So what we've done, we have Stan Auster on the phone with us. I'm going to intro and get his mic all set up so that we can hear him. And we're going to hear from Stan talking about what battling sin amidst isolation and loneliness looks like. We're going to hear a little bit about his story. I'll get to chime in a little bit about what this has looked like in my life. But we really want this to be a broad spectrum for all of our viewers that are chiming in, to understand these times and see these times as times of joy, not just times of defeat or depression. And I'm talking at an individual level. It is important that we as men do take care of ourselves. We do believe that with Men of Hope. And we want to be a ministry, that the Men of Hope are taking care of themselves. So amidst national crises, it is important. We want to be different than this world. We hear that each Sunday on what it means to be a part of the body of Christ and being sent into this world. And part of that's being different. We don't want to call somebody out to flamboyant difference, but simply having a perspective of hope and joy, and winning that battle of loneliness and isolation is one of the many ways to go after that. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So I got Stan here. Stan's going to be talking. We'll do some questions, but just so you guys all know, while we're going, we would love for you guys to post some questions that you would love us to talk about, whether questions directly for me or questions directly for Stan. Go ahead and post those in the chat as we're chatting. We'd love to hear some unique perspectives and personal questions that we can bring up. I'm sorry if we won't be able to get to all of them, but we'll do our best to answer some questions from the audience. So Stan, we got you on the phone here. Why don't you say hello to everybody?
Hello, everyone.
All right. Stan,
and let me say, Jake, I got to tell you that this is huge to be your guest. Oops.
Yeah, you're my first and as of now last guest. So congratulations to you, Stan.
It's a pleasure to be number one. Well, we've only got about 6 people listening, so but I assume in a few weeks you'll have millions.
Well, we'll do that praying at some point. But really, it's a joy to have you on, Stan. We do currently have a good, that's more than 2 handfuls of folks that are chiming in here. So there is an audience for you. Don't worry. But Stan, why don't you just give us a brief little background? I guess I don't even know where you're from or where you grew up. Could you give us just like a 1 minute overview of what Stan growing up was like? Where are you
Okay,
from?
I can do that in 30 seconds here. I grew up in Los Angeles, but I am a Steeler at heart. I see you have your Mets jersey on, which brings pain to me, but I grew up on the other coast. Although I grew up in LA, I'm a Steeler fan because I was born there. I have grew up in a pretty big family, so there wasn't a lot of loneliness or isolation, I should say, there. But then I met a girl real quick in Southern Cal whose father went to Bethel and told me to leave his daughter alone and go apply for Bethel College. So I actually did that, and there I met my current wife, Carol, which many of you know, and it's been love ever since. So that's kind of how I got to Minnesota from LA, and I've been here for over 30 years. So a lot longer than I ever thought I would.
Yeah, and you and Carol you're pretty actively involved with some of the ministries at Hope. Could you just give us a picture? What would you say are your roles at Hope Community Church?
Well, number one, I am an elder at Hope, have been for a very long time, but that allows me, in some sense, to be in a lot of different ministries that I get an overview of a whole lot. But my two primary ministries, I would say, other than being an elder, for some of you, I'm sure, have been in the SHAPE class before. If you have, give a shout out to SHAPE Online. We love that class. It's one of my favorites. And we're a shameless plug now. We're doing it every fall on Wednesday nights. The other one that, Jake, you're very familiar with, and maybe quite a few of you on the line as well, it's the pre-married class. And that goes on twice a year. Hope is such a church or such a place where people congregate that we have to do that class twice. And right now this is a small class, and we've got 12 couples. So typically we have classes of sizes of 20, 25 twice a year. So it's a pleasure to do that type of stuff. And to be honest, I learn about my marriage all the more of all the things I should be doing when I take that class. So Jake, I don't know if you have a big shout out for the class yourself.
Wow. Yeah, big shout out. I know that our church definitely draws a plenty from Campus Crusade for Couples and Campus Couples for Christ, both the University of Minnesota and the University of St. Thomas. We definitely have a lot of folks that are in that age bracket of marriage. And big shout out, Stan and Carol did do the marriage class for my bride and I think we're doing good, right, sweetie? But seriously, Stan, thanks again for coming on. And one of the things that really stuck out to having you on is your perspective for men's ministry, and in particular, you do a great job leading with being in tune with yourself. You've mentioned aspects of this in the marriage class that we've taken and other conversations that we've had, but taking it seriously about our own thoughts, our own interactions, and taking care of ourselves. That's something as men, it's really easy to not want to take care of ourselves, to make sure that we're taking care of everyone else. And this can lead to lots of loneliness and lots of isolation. So to first start out, you have a lot of wisdom on this, Stan. So I know when we chatted before and I brought up loneliness and isolation, some things came to mind. What are some of the things that come to mind when you think about the men of Hope dealing with loneliness and isolation?
Yeah, good question to start us off here. The other ministry I would say that I take great delight in that I didn't mention before is just mentoring young men in their lives and where they're at. And I have a few relationships now, but I can think of so many through the years that I've been able to talk to specifically on this topic. And one of the first things that a lot of the guys bring up, which I completely agree with, is that loneliness and isolation are two very different things. In fact, a lot of them tell me that we're in the most connected generation, yet the loneliest generation. So you can be in school, you can be in a small group, you can have 1,000 Facebook friends, or 3,000 like Pastor T, and possibly still be a very lonely person. And conversely, actually, you can be quite by yourself and isolated and quite happy and not alone at all. So the first thing that gets brought up with me is that these are very two different things. So that's number one. Number two is that a lot of people have a connection with Jesus in this area around loneliness, because Jesus could quite possibly have been the loneliest human on earth, especially at that point, which we're coming up to here, that we're celebrating in the garden, right, prior to his beating and his crucifixion. So loneliness has a lot less to do with our physical isolation and more to do with how we feel disconnected and alienated from others.
Yeah, that's spot on it. And to be honest, what a blessing it is to hear those words earlier than later. That it's okay for men to have emotions and feelings and be in tune with them. So on that point, in your years of ministry and getting to see men, I'm sure, in loneliness and in isolation, what are some of the early signs that you in ministry have picked up from folks that have really struggled with this?
Well, probably one of the first ones is that people notice that there is, along with feelings of disconnection and alienation, there is also the presence of pain. And this pain can be deep. It can be, right, obviously, different places that you physically feel a pain and at times aren't really sure what it is. That's one piece. The other thing is that you notice that normalcy in your life is not there. There is, if I were to look at a dashboard, and my lights were on the dashboard, and my loneliness lights or dashboard, one of the things that would be popping up there would be a lack of, or a desire to stay away from entering relationships. As much as we want those relationships, one of the big indicators of loneliness is that I am not willing to engage rather deeply with someone else because I don't want to get pain more than I have already. I'm already dealing with too much of that. So if I were to reach out and try, I might even have more pain. And so we kind of get in this circle where you can have one hand pushing people away and the other hand calling people towards you. And so there's this disconformity, right, between wanting people in my life and not wanting people in my life. So that's another dashboard, I would say. That would be a potential way to be able to tell if I'm really lonely or not versus isolation.
Yeah, and I actually want to run on one of those points that you brought up, Stan, and that's around I guess how I call it is stiff arming. When I have pain in my life, or when I have something that's difficult for me to want to engage my emotions with, or something like that, I'll stiff arm. There you go, sports term, but I'll try and stiff arm everyone else in my life so that I can deal with it, and I'll make it okay for me. So Stan, I want to ask, like, with that tendency that I have, how would you encourage men to better be in tune to their tendencies when they experience pain? Because I've heard it said that grief will hit you like a ton of bricks, and it's hard to prepare. But what are some things that you would encourage men to be in tune with, or ways that they can be in tune to their emotions and feelings for times that pain will hit?
I always go back to Romans 12:2, where the Apostle Paul tells us to renew our mind. And I would throw that in here in the way in which we interact with Jesus, we interact with the Bible, and we interact with other friends. So, for example, one of the things I would tell you and others is that to really get into a little bit more of who Jesus was as a person. In other words, yes, he felt that loneliness and at the garden, but in another sense, in his ministry, Jesus actually intentionally withdrew into loneliness, into places, but he did that so he could leverage the loneliness, and he prayed. So sometimes when we look at Jesus, we see that he actually moves toward that, and he took advantage of those lonely opportunities to pray and to be with his Father. So one of the things that I like to talk to guys about is take advantage of pain. Take advantage of the loneliness that you're feeling. Because in my own life, I, talk about my experiences sometimes. I have had probably some of my most deeper connections with God when I have felt the most pain in my life. So we can leverage loneliness in a way that we maybe would never leverage at a time when we're not feeling, when we're feeling all full of ourselves, or money's good. In times of prosperity, we oftentimes don't go to God in a way that God uses pain in our life. So one of my favorite Catholic mentors, I'll call him, Henry Nouwen, said, I forget how he said it, he said, we may find that our loneliness is not only tolerable, but it's also actually fruitful. So it's a shifting, I would say, Jake, of the mind and how you interpret what loneliness can mean for you, and more of thinking about what I might ask you is, how can you take advantage of that time or those feelings of loneliness? How could they be something that you can leverage? And then we can go on and talk about moments of leverage as well. So just a few thoughts that come to mind.
Yeah, no, splendid for sure. I think it's super important to be understanding what works for me. Something that I learned in baseball a lot was being your best coach, and trying to take in information and then very specifically and strategically apply it to yourself. I think it can be really hard to be in tune and try and have that, I guess, drawn out from you, that you can understand you're feeling lonely, or be in tune to say, this is a time that I can mourn, that I can press in with the Lord. I can be in relationship and close. So Stan, I have a question for you. I know that one of the ways that I need to draw those out is through other people. My wife is the main vessel to pull those things out for me and get emotions out and feelings out. I was blessed to have brothers in Christ I lived with and grew close with to help, pull the manhole cover out from my heart to really assess and be honest. What are some other ways that you've seen men work to that loneliness? Because sometimes we can do it ourselves, but sometimes we can't.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the Apostle Paul now, and I'm thinking 2 Timothy here, and his letter to Timothy. He actually says, and I think it's the 4th chapter somewhere, where, Timothy, come to me quickly, right? Things are tough, and I need to see you. I don't want to just have you write a letter back to me. I actually need to see you. So one of the things we need to do is, I think, get out from behind our computer. And as we hear Pastor Court and Steve say often, take a risk. You can't go to church and just sit in the pew and expect people to come to you, which they should, but you can't expect that as a way to alleviate your loneliness. So to be honest, even married men are lonely unless they take a risk and they move toward their spouse in a way that they had never before. The Bible is very clear that married people can be very lonely. And there's nothing sometimes worse than seeing a wife who's married and is not loved, or a husband who's married and not feel loved. So marriage doesn't cure our loneliness. In fact, sometimes it heightens it. So the real trick here is not always just getting with people, because again, we said you could be lonely in a crowd of people. It is, in some ways, it's taking the bull by the horn, right? Or it's taking the defender by the stiff arm, right? Or whatever analogy you want to use there, Jake, you're a baseball player. But it's actually taking what I would call our calculated risks. And by calculated risks, I mean you are not going to dive in the deep end with somebody that you just met and share your whole life story, because you might actually push them away. But there are calculated risks that we can do, and we can disclose at a level that the other person's at, and then maybe take it one step further and see how they respond. So the long answer to us men, we need to be better at taking calculated risks and jumping in a little bit more into the pool. So it's the pool of relationships a little bit more. That's hard for us guys. I know I grew up in a house that was very protect yourself, right? the old, again, I don't think anybody remembers Cheers, but there was the old guy named Norm, and they would say, "Hey, Norm," when he'd come in, and they'd say, "How's life?" And he'd say, "It's dog eat dog world, and I'm wearing milk bone underwear." You guys remember that? And I think what Norm is getting at is life's tough, and we push it away with any means possible except for vulnerability.
Yeah, that is a really good point. Thinking about how and when to be tough, because there are times that we as men want to be tough, or and it can be appropriate. We can help bear burdens and things like that. But it's also really important as we look to the example of Christ of being vulnerable. And I think that primarily starts with vulnerability with God and letting ourselves be known. That's another difficulty. And then pouring that over, like you said, with the Apostle Paul, letting ourselves be known and be vulnerable, no matter our status, right? Whether we're an apostle or not, to do that with men in our lives and relationships in our lives. So we're getting some questions in from the live chat. I'd love to ping a couple of them towards you. And I think one really stuck out to me, and that was, what advice would you have for single men in dealing with loneliness and isolation?
Well, again, single or married, sometimes the single guys don't quite get that being married does not alleviate loneliness. It can actually heighten it. But for single guys, I think some of the things that you, Jake, have already kind of mentioned here, and I would just reiterate to leverage their loneliness as an openness, as you mentioned, to a stronger relationship with the Lord and a deeper understanding of His love for us. So I'm not trying to be Pollyanna here. I get facing loneliness in our lives is tough and it's painful. But my experience, again, is when I have faced loneliness, even as a single adult, I have, as you learn to press into that and use it in a sense as a friend, and use it as an opportunity to grow closer to the Lord. That's a big thing. And as you mentioned, you go closer to God, and He will gently, in His Spirit, push you toward other men. I would say that's probably the biggest thing. So one of the mistakes guys make is they think that loneliness can be cured by a female relationship. And then they can get into all sorts of trouble there because they're trying to alleviate their loneliness in a whole bunch of ways. And some of those are not as godly as others. So I really would recommend trying to calculated risk with other male friends, because you're not trying to do this to just alleviate your relationship or your loneliness. But in one sense, the Apostle Paul tells us to think of others even more than ourselves. So if we're able to actually think of others and move into somebody else's life vicariously in a weird way, when you minister to other people, your life becomes less lonely as well. So just a couple thoughts there on that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think what stuck out there a lot to me was it can be misleading thinking that married men they're no longer lonely, right? They've been saved from loneliness or something like that. And that ties in with what you were saying earlier, Stan, about there are calculated risks that men who are married are continually taking towards their wives. Those risks to continue being vulnerable and moving towards wives in new ways. I think that there's some articulated words there. Larry
Crabb, who a lot of you guys don't know, he's an older one, but I highly recommend him. He said, being married is like being two ticks and no dog. You're trying to suck the life out of each other, and neither one of you are able to be the dog, so to speak. So, and that can be, by the way, that can be male relationships too. If you're both trying to cure your loneliness with somebody else, you're two ticks and no dog as well. So that's what I mean by trying to fulfill, trying to help other people out, ministering to other people. And that really does alleviate your loneliness, and you're able to fulfill and support somebody else.
So I have another question to go off of that. Sure. How would you recommend walking the line of reaching out to God and reaching out to men in dealing with loneliness and isolation? because it seems like they're, a default, I'll just reach out to God, or I'll just lean that way. But that can be difficult as well. Like that can be a difficult encounter, and can sometimes leave people feeling more isolated or lonely if they don't get the response they expected right away from God. But that is a time, like you said, where Christ in the garden, coming up on Easter, may not have gotten the ideal response from God or something like that. But can you talk about walking that line of leaning into God and leaning into men, and how to find, not doing one more than the other?
Well, I'll tell you the two thoughts that shot through my head right away. Johnny Cash, right away, walk the line.
Yeah.
First thought that popped in my head there, but I'll try to put that to the side. The second one is 2 quarters, 1 quarter, 2 sides, right? It's kind of the same thing on the, you get to one, 2 sides of the same coin kind of a thing here. The second thought came to my mind. Those aren't, well, I always try to tell people that we don't live in an or world, we live in an and world. So both of those are critically important. It isn't one over the other. It's both of those at the same time. In fact, God will push you into godly male relationships, and good godly male relationships will push you to the Lord. So those two are not exclusive of one another, but I think they partner extremely well. When I think of the mentoring relationships I have or the friendships I have, they do both. That's really critical when we take a look at the friends we hang out with. Are they moving you more to a relationship, or are they moving you to be more vulnerable in a sense? Now, I'm not saying that every relationship I love right now. What I would rather be doing actually than being on this call is watching NCAA basketball, to be honest. But we can't do that right now. There are times when I cannot tell you how fun it is to have a group of guys in a room watching basketball together and not even talking to each other. And I feel so much camaraderie with them. So I have those kind of relationships too, and I love those. But I also need the relationships that ask me how I'm doing, and I can ask them how they're doing. And we're not just talking about the weather kind of a thing there. Or batting averages, or when, Twins or Vikings football or whatever it is, So for that question about walking the line between those two, I would actually hold them both up, But as many people say, if you go to one side, there's dangers, and if you fall too far on the male side, you lose the connection with God. And sometimes if you fall too far on the relationship with God, you become too religious, and everything is okay, and I'm fine, and you're ready to mask all your pain because God will take care of everything, and you think you don't need friends because I've got God. I think that's the danger of falling on the other side as well. God's never called us to do that. So we have to be careful of being too religious in a sense, and not taking God's pleasure by taking advantage of the friends that He's introduced us to. Because we need both.
Yeah, fall back to the Word. I think that would be far-fetched to, try and find a time that God calls us to Him and to His people as well. Great articulation of walking the line there, because maybe that wasn't the right way to say it. Both and is important. So one more question here from our live chat, Stan, and I think it's a really good one. I think that we can find this doesn't really go away, because most of us can say that we're busy or that we keep busy, but what are some ways to create space and margin for new friendships?
Well, it might be too soon, but coronavirus, right?
That would be a way to definitely create some space. Now we're moving towards each other.
Well, you know what I mean? Right? So I also have another strong Catholic friend named Peter Krepp. If you've not read Peter Krepp, he's great. He was asked a question about how do you see more beauty? How do you see more friendships? How do you see more preciousness in others in our life? And his answer was get cancer. And I think he was onto something, kind of like loneliness, that you appreciate deeper fellowship when you're in crisis. So never let a good crisis go to waste, right? it doesn't have to be a crisis, but crisis does bring us into people's lives if we allow it to. We take advantage of these moments of literally physical isolation, like what you're doing, Jake. Maybe we would have never had this conversation with these men on this call had we not had something that's going on right now. So how do we create space? We're doing it right now. One of the ways is by, some kind of crisis in our life. Another way, though, is quite frankly, as the Apostle Paul says in Philippians 4, I think it is, where he says, finally, brothers, whatever's true, whatever's noble, whatever's right, whatever's pure, so on, so I can't think of it all, lovely, admirable. If it's anything like that, think about things. He's telling us to be intentional. And he also says, if you abide by these things, you know what the promise is? That the peace of God's going to be with you. So this intentionality of moving toward, I don't think there's any other, there's no easy button here that you can push and say, I abandon loneliness now. It's an intentional choice of walking the line and moving toward God and moving toward others. There's no shortcut in this sense. It's a sense of embracing the trial, as we like to say, and moving forward. And that leads me to my last thing here. I don't know how much time we have here, Jake, but I just want to throw this one verse out here because I do a prison ministry at one of the local state prisons on Monday night, and the ministry of the Bible study. We just kind of got into James, and the verse that I left them with 2 weeks ago was James 1, 2, and 3. I think we're all familiar with it, right? Consider, ponder, right? Think about, be intentional, be aware. It's pure joy, brothers, right, when you face trials of many kinds, because we know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance, and perseverance will finish its work so that you will be mature, not lacking in anything. So there's this trial that's going on in our lives, like loneliness, and at some parts, it's creating a stronger sense of isolation that feels pain. We should be consider this in some way a trial that develops our perseverance muscle, that allows us to become stronger. And the Bible says that it will actually help us to be more mature and complete where we're not lacking anything. So we have to, in a sense, look this as a trial so that we can grow our muscles of perseverance. I left that with the prisoners 2 weeks ago and told them, hey, I want you to be thinking about trials that will be coming your way for this week, because next Monday you're going to share all these trials. Well, I haven't been able to get back to them yet. And talk about isolation. They have to stay in their prison cells now and not leave because of this coronavirus. So they're really feeling isolated. So I'm looking forward, I hope, at some point to be able to get back to that prison and hear their stories over the past few weeks, or maybe even the past month, depending on when I'm able to get back there again, and to hear how that verse has blessed them. So anyways, probably said too much there, but I love the topic, and I love talking. But these guys are asking the questions. Absolutely perfect.
No, thank you. Thank you again. And I think that's true. And I know that we are funneling a lot into, hey, this is the time of crisis. And, feeling that way is in some ways more democratically. We feel that as a country. We feel that as a community. Feel it in our jobs. It can definitely be difficult, identifying what sort of crisis this is that we're currently in. But it definitely is biblical that we can pursue joy in that. Man, a lot of good words from that. Thank you again for joining us, Stan. And I can see a lot of the folks in the chat were echoing some of the things that you were saying, and again, making the best of a crisis. Yes, toilet paper is making the best of a crisis and stocking up on it, but more so getting this chance to talk and hear from you, Stan. So thank you again for joining us. We're super excited to keep having great guests on, and you did a great job being the leadoff batter, Stan. We appreciate it.
Hey, love being on the show. I think you got a great thing going here, and enjoy the rest of your show with all the guys.
You got it. We'll have some fun. All right, brother. Thanks again. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, take care.
All right. So thanks again to Stan for shouting out with us. Oh, my music's playing. thank you again for Stan. You can find and reach Stan really easily. It's just stan@hopecc.com. We'll have some resources available for everyone for some follow-up listed out in the description of this video, as well as on the Facebook page for Men of Hope. So don't worry if you weren't taking notes, but Stan really brought a lot of thunder around isolation and loneliness. And if there are any things that you want to follow up with him and virtually connect, you can do so at stan@hopecc.com. But in addition, there's a lot of resources that we're surrounded with, and we might not all know about them, and that's okay. So for Men of Hope, we have 3 tenets that we're really trying to love our church, love our community, and do all that well. And those 3 tenets that we're about are community, evangelism, and discipleship. And with those 3 things important, they can be challenged at a time like this, having community. So on that point, I'd love to share some resources around community, this hopefully being one of them, to have some community this way, as well as our Sunday mornings that we can tune into Facebook Live and see our community tuning in at the same time. But I would really encourage using technology to our advantage, whether that's moving towards a male relationship in our life that we've had before, or that God may have placed as a blessing in our lives recently. But moving towards a relationship there is another great way to be connecting in community. And because we won't by nature just have easy community and how community's doing. On an evangelism front, this is also a time to be set apart. It's a time to be different. I don't know if street preachers have now taken up Zoom preacher in the world. So to stay away from that point, it is a tough time to be living out the gospel and sharing that gospel with our workspace and community. But it definitely is a time to be set apart and be helping hands. And it'd be hard for me to come up with any better words than encouragement that we hear from our team on Sundays. And going out into this world as an example set apart in Christ. The third piece is on discipleship. And this is something that really channels into some of the things that we've already talked about. And we want to post a couple of links to be discipled and disciple people within the Men of Hope ministry. We've called it coaching before. We've called it mentoring. They're all kind of one and the same. But discipleship is just a time that we want you to be known by other men in this community, and we also want you to go out and know more of the men in this community. It is super, super awesome to have someone in your life, someone in your corner that can understand you and grow with you. They can hold you accountable and they can lift you up when you need. And we actually have a ministry that helps to connect individuals in that way. So if you haven't checked out our discipleship team within Men of Hope, trying to connect with someone on a regular basis, or maybe a less frequent basis, but someone to connect with personally, we'd love you to check that out. We'll post a link in the follow-up notes from this conversation, as well as on the Facebook page about being connected with our discipleship team. And what a great time to do that. You can do just a simple Zoom call or Google Hangouts or FaceTime and just get to know someone new. This could be a great time to win a crisis and getting to know a couple new people around the Men of Hope community. The last piece, the last resource that I wanted to make known is this is going to be around until further notice. We're going to keep doing late nights with Jake Smith every Friday night at 9 o'clock until who knows when. We want this to be a consistent place that you guys can come on. You can be poured into by some of our elder teams and some guest speakers coming on, just as a place for you to spark community, spark evangelism, spark discipleship in your life, and make sure that we can be winning what this crisis is making difficult, and that's gathering and obeying God in that way to gather as his people. So we're going to use virtual and technology to let ourselves gather. So this will be here each week. So make sure you stay tuned for Late Nights with Jake Smith. In addition to that, would love to hear thoughts that everyone has on what we can cover, what we can talk about in this time. What would be a great message to hear? What are some things that you would love to see happen in this space, just so that we can have discussion and have kind of a feature panel for someone to share on. If there are things that you would love to see on this channel, go ahead to our Facebook page. The link is in the description of this video. If you hop on there, Ben Gessling has posted a post inviting comments and suggestions around this particular setup. So if there are things that come to mind that you think we could be considering and bringing into this, we'd love to hear from you. So go hop onto that Facebook and leave your comments there, because we'd love to have some suggestions and make this a communal approach to connecting. So we've had a lot of info come through. I just wanted to leave one last piece of encouragement and tying a bow on all this great stuff. There's all sorts of action items that Stan brought to the surface for us as men to be doing now. And one of those that was a common denominator through what he was talking about was connection with God. So I just wanted us to hear from God's word, real brief. And I have a quick verse that I'd love to share that I think speaks to loneliness and isolation. It speaks to the day and place that we're living in this world. And it speaks to us as men having a both and relationship with men in our lives and relationship with God in our lives. So I just want to share from Isaiah 55, verses 6 to 8. Isaiah 55, verse 6. Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call to him while he is near. Let the wicked one abandon his way, and the sinful one his thoughts. Let him return to the Lord, so he may have compassion on him. And to our God, for he will freely forgive. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, and your ways are not my ways. This is the Lord's declaration. This came on my heart just to share and trying to bring God's word in context today for a number of reasons. All that is happening and the pandemic of COVID-19 and all the byproducts of that socially, economically, lists can go on in a lot of avenues. Why is a great question. Why? Right? We're asking that question as Job asked that question. Why? But there's a huge acknowledgement that the Lord's declaring here that his thoughts are not our thoughts. And thank goodness, if my thoughts were the governing authority of all things, we'd be in trouble. And I forget that truth exists. And I'm so thankful that God is the leading thought in all things. And I want to just give that piece as an encouragement of sovereignty. We can predict and we can calculate. We can do all these predictions that we want to see what will be, but in reality, we know not. We can't quite piece that together because we don't have that huge vision. But what's great is God has given us access there. And I think that's pointed out, that because we don't have to know those thoughts, he says, let me take care of that, and invites us to seek him. Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call to him while he is near. I think that this is a time, especially with loneliness and isolation being a reality in several avenues. For some people, being trapped with your family can feel like isolation. It doesn't just mean that everyone's all alone with no people around them. It can be a deep emotional and spiritual loneliness. So seeking the Lord while he may be found, calling to him while he is near. Really encourage you guys to be jumping into whatever it looks like for you to be seeking the Lord, whatever that's looked like in recent seasons or times of crisis. Would really encourage that avenue. And if that's best done with other men, I know that there are some men that are gathering for Bible studies and just trying to be accountable and jump in virtually together. One of those is going to be happening on as a community within Hope. So stay tuned on the Facebook page. We want to post out some gatherings that folks can be connected and do a simple early morning devotional before the day really gets off and going. So really want to encourage you guys to continue seeking the Lord and acknowledging that His thoughts aren't ours and our thoughts aren't His, especially in a time that we can really ask why. That's a great feeling to be able to release that anxiety and not hold that, which is exciting. Even though that can feel incredibly anxious and scary. It's a great place to be, though. So I hope that you guys have felt encouraged around loneliness and isolation there. There is no way in heck that we could have encapsulated that entire topic in this time. We just wanted it to be a piece and an entrance into that. So to wrap us up, the last thing to send you off this week is the play of the week. I wish it was a highlight film. I didn't figure out the tech in time to actually get highlight films on here. I was thinking about having like some dad highlights or some quarantine highlights or something like that, just to lighten the load or lift the mood a little bit. But making that wasn't really super easy. So instead, I decided, I could play and have my play of the week be a song. So each week, I'm going to be sharing a song. Would love you to check it out. And this is going to be ranging everything. I don't know if I'll get to, the Baroque period in Rachmaninoff and such, but I'll try and keep it in context of today and give you guys something to listen to. So the play of the week this week is a song called Authentic by Run 51. I'm going to type it up in the comments. Authentic by Run 51. This is a song that I was introduced to a couple years ago, and I think it really speaks to what authenticity in the Lord looks like. It's a song that talks about, in an upbeat and catchy way, it talks about pressing into the Lord and mainly not going there with a bunch of words, but going there to be loved by God. And that can be hard to do. That can be hard to do for me is in my manliness, going somewhere to be loved in that way. So I'd really encourage you guys. I'm going to type it up here so that you can check it out. The song is Authentic by the band Run 51. All right. Well, that's all that we have for our very first ever Late Night with Jake Smith episode. We hope that you felt encouraged during this time. And don't let this be the only means. Don't let the embers go unnurtured that might have been stirred in your heart by the Spirit. So we'd love you to follow up on some of the resources and follow up with the community that we have here at Hope. So we love you guys a lot. Thank you again for tuning in. This video will be it'll be posted that you can access at later times too. It's not exclusive just for live. So we're happy to share this ministry. Awesome. Thank you again. I'm going to chime out, get myself another cup of tea, and get ready for bed. All right, guys. Have a great night.